Well, hello, Philadelphia, and thank you for coming out today for the Women's Upraising, where we want to raise up women's voices and push back against violence against women and girls. I'm Sharon Byrne. I'm the Executive Director of the Women's Liberation Front. We are a radical feminist organization dedicated to restoring, protecting, and advancing the rights of women and girls. I'd like really quickly just to everybody give a hand here to our Philly PD who is watching us today, making sure that we stay nice and safe and that we don't have any problems this afternoon. And thank you to our wonderful Harley and Sound guys. Thank you. That was a lot to go through getting this together. All right, so thank you for joining us to push back loudly, proudly against violence against women and girls. It seeks to silence our voices, stand us down, make us cower, and hide our light. This is the 104th anniversary of the ratification of women's right to vote in this country, which is why we are in suffragette colors today, to celebrate that. Some of you may know there is an active movement in this country to repeal the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote. That has been talked about loudly in a lot of internet chat rooms. It is 2024, and the reason that we're doing this event is because it is a terrible world for women at present. We are being knocked back, rolled back, so fast on our rights. Everybody needs to say a quick hand over your heart for our sisters in the red states, right, who are being left to bleed out on hospital, steps and in cars, right? So I'm going to talk to you about three specific cases. They're here on this sign behind me. If you don't know these names, I want to introduce them to you. First is 71-year-old French woman, Giselle Pellicot. She learned from the police who arrested her husband for taking videos of women's skirts that he had videos of her being raped repeatedly while she was drugged over a 10-year period. 71 years old. My friend Jessica Gonzalez is going to talk to you more about this, but this woman is bravely bringing her case to the world. They are prosecuting 51 of the rapists, 51. The others are still at large, or they are too important in the community to prosecute. Can you believe that we are at this state of affairs? In Kenya, a wonderful woman runner named Rebecca Cheptegei came home. She's Ugandan from the Olympics this last July in Paris. Her boyfriend poured petrol all over her and set her on fire. She died 3 days later from her injuries. In Kolkata, in India, Dr. Mumita Debnath, who's a doctor in training, was violently raped and murdered in the hospital in which she worked. At least 3 different specimens of semen were found in her body. The hospital tried to say it was suicide, even though she had violent injuries all over her body, and they tried to pressure her parents to withdraw their case. Men are now searching internet porn sites for CCTV footage of the rape and the murder. I am from Santa Barbara, California, where in 2014 the world first learned the term incel. Elliot Rodger had been immersed in 4chan chat rooms where men spewed violent rhetoric about women, how we owed them sex, using sexist jargon like "thought, that hoe over there." Rodger wrote a terrible manifesto, loaded up guns, and drove to a sorority at the University of California at Santa Barbara, murdered 6 women, shot them to death, and wounded 14 others before he killed himself. To those that seek to oppress women, girls, and make them cower, today I say, not today. Say it with me, not today. We are going to have some serious discussions here today about something that affects all of us, and that is violence against women and girls. And you may think to yourself, now, I actually haven't experienced that. Maybe I haven't had something violent happen to me. So I'm just going to ask show of hands if you have either known someone that experienced these things or you have yourself. Femicide, sexual violence, domestic violence or intimate partner violence, female genital mutilation, emotional and psychological abuse like threats, control of movements, human trafficking or coerced prostitution, technological abuse, online stalking, cyberbullying, doxing, child or early forced marriage, and financial and economic abuse. Okay, so everyone here, every freaking woman has a story, and some men apparently have a story of violence against women. Every woman. I would like to say to you, and I would like you to say to each other, I will be free, you will be free, and we will free the others. Turn to each other and say, I will be free, you will be free, and we will free the others. We had a cadre of speakers lined up today because we are going into a dark corner of the human heart. And we wanted to bring some folks to you with different perspectives on gun violence. I want you to understand that some of these people were too scared to speak. But who did not come today that was invited was Mayor Sherelle Parker to speak about gun violence. Not here. Councilmember O'Rourke to talk about violence in communities. Not here. Some of the domestic violence shelters and human trafficking centers. Not here today. They were too afraid to come and speak in public on violence. So I would like for you to say with me, not one more, not one more. If we had the power, and we do, and you could end violence against women and girls, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you end it? Wouldn't you stop it if you had the power? Okay, so we do have the power to do this. So today is all about ending the silence, no more violence, women will be free. Say it with me. No more violence, women will be free. I would like to call up to the speaker, Jessica Gonzalez. She's going to come up and she's going to talk to us more about the case that happened in France and about why sexual violence is so prevalent. Jessica, come on up.
This week, many of us learned about Giselle Plaza, a 71-year-old woman residing in Avignon, France. Her story is so outrageous that it has made news globally. Often, I do not have the stomach to bear witness to the horrors that befall women under the global regime of patriarchy. I am brave as an activist, but I am weak as a witness. This story is worth knowing about because Giselle is worth knowing about. In recent years, Giselle had begun to believe that she may have been suffering from dementia. She was experiencing memory disturbances and other issues that led her to seek medical attention. Through the police, she eventually learned that the cause of her issues was not disease or disorder, it was drugging. Giselle's husband had been drugging her for a decade, inviting dozens of strange men over the years into their home so those men could rape her unconscious body. Dominique's abuse of Giselle was only discovered because Dominique was so insatiable in his desire to violate women's boundaries that he had taken up filming up women's skirts in a super rapes. At no point did any of the men involved bother to speak with Giselle directly while she was awake to confirm she was interested in participating in this sick scenario. Not a single one of them ever reached out to police about what was going on. Giselle pointed out on the stand that they could have reported this with an anonymous phone call, but they never did. Instead, they showed up, followed instructions laid out by Dominique, which featured raping Giselle's unconscious body, and went on with their lives as if they had engaged in a transaction as mundane as buying a used toaster off Craigslist. Many are horrified by this story because of the ordinary nature of the men enlisted to do the raping. These were husbands and fathers. They're journalists, nurses, firefighters. I want to emphasize that one of the lessons of this story is that we cannot rely on the conscience of ordinary men to help dig us out of rape culture. The only men in this scenario that helped Giselle are the men who were employed to investigate crimes. And even there, it's not hard to imagine a universe in which even police would turn a blind eye, or worse. In fact, one of Giselle's many rapists is a former police officer. Now, for the hopefulness that must be found in the face of rape culture. With her quiet dignity and inspiring poise, Giselle reminds us to fight. Giselle chose to waive her right to anonymity as a victim so that all the facts of the case may be publicized. Giselle's attorney told the media that she wanted to show that shame must change sides. A strong woman with a powerful message. let's do our part to help make sure that when it comes to rape, shame changes sides. She models the courage we should all seek to summon. Armored with little beyond a pair of smart sunglasses, Giselle walks into the courtroom to give testimony on the horrors she had endured for a decade with 50 of her rapists right there in the room. That is extraordinarily powerful. If Giselle will fight, so will I, and so should you. Every day is a good day to stand up. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. My name is Margot Heffernan, and I'm Board Vice President at Women's Liberation Front, or WOLF. Let me just start by saying this. The year is 2024, but it feels as if the calendar has rolled back 100 years for women and girls. Hyperbole? Over the top? No. Each day, women are censored, denigrated, and erased, called bigots for speaking biological truth, and forced to compete against men in our own sports. In this dystopian era, we are even told that a man is a woman if he feels like he is. And we are violated for every breath of truth we take. And with this comes the persistence of male violence. The age-old crime of rape never changes. It is a decidedly male crime, one that has been perpetrated upon us for eons. The carnage and brutality of sexual assault and rape is as real today as it was across antiquity, and its memory lingers in the collective consciousness of every female on this earth. The history of male violence against women comes in endless forms. Rape as a war crime, sex trafficking and prostitution, on and on and on. Over the eons, our female forms have been bent and shamed, dressed as spectacles for male exploitation, or hidden beneath heavy cloth to cover male shame. We have been blamed and brutalized, twisted into the guilty victim. And right here in Philadelphia, the memory and consciousness of sexual assault and rape hangs heavy. We see the very same mentality, in fact. The victim is the perpetrator, guilty as charged for her own bondage. Many of the women here who are assaulted are already victims of a culture that has beaten them down. They are women who have been assaulted, women who live on the downside of life, the untouchables, really, part of this culture. 2 in 3 victims of sex crimes don't report to police. Fear of retaliation and shame account for this. Women involved in sex work are among the most likely victims of rape. They are, in so many ways, the lowest rung, the untouchable caste. And this is the thing about history, how it repeats, as they say, or foretells. Maybe Norman Cousins said it best. History is a vast early warning system, he said. True words indeed. You see, it was 53 years ago this month when I stood within an arm's length of a woman I loved while her neck was pressed and squeezed by male fingers, or small dark spots eventually laced her throat. And I know that the memory of grief is always retrieved by the original trauma. And the blueprint of male violence persists. Here in Philadelphia, women are faced with the same old problems. Rape victims suffer in silence, taken to a sterile place where they are shuttered away and discarded. Rape kits are severely underfunded here, and the system has made some progress, but many obstacles remain. Almost 200 rape kits still sit unexamined. Almost 200 women wait in silence, their history and memories bound to the future. Why does the cycle persist? Is it the new misogyny that has replaced the old? I believe it is. We are witnessing a frightening revision of things past, this time flashed across the visuals of the world screen. the International Olympic Committee attempted to normalize the idea that men can punch, pummel, and humiliate women in the boxing ring. On the world stage, two men used their coarse hands to batter and thrash the heads and faces of 6 women, and the world looked on. Make no mistake about it, those male hands are no different from the hands of a common criminal, an abuser who hates women deeply. When I watched the Italian Olympic boxer Angela Carini, her face bloodied and her body curled in shame, I knew that this was history foretold. The early warning system sounds. Yet the unbearable hurt and shame that women have carried from the beginning repeats. The memory of grief is always revolved by the original trauma. And the young women who have taken in this heinous sight, the new misogyny exhibited on the world stage, these are the women who will be here long after many of us are gone. Will they continue to believe their future is this? And they too will remember. Will their grief continue to be retrieved by the continuing environment of male violence? Right here in Philly, the blueprint of male violence continues. The city of Philadelphia is the only jurisdiction in Pennsylvania that provides rape kit exams in a single building relocated or co-located with law enforcement. State law requires hospitals to provide rape care in the ER, but many Philadelphia systems have received citations from the state for violating that policy. They continue to be sent to the small, forlorn facility, and they continue to wait for justice to be served. The rape center is also $400,000 under budget. Cost of a kit is $1,500, while the kits are only reimbursed at $1,000 per kit. And still, the world looks on. Sisters, what we must remember is this: the next generation of women are watching us. Some will be here, like I said, long after so many of us are gone. What legacy are we leaving them? What kind of imprint for the future will we leave? Do we want them to see male violence completely normalized? Philadelphia can be a model for us. We can focus on and protect so many sexual assault victims right here. We can address the long, long lines of women suffering. We can take action now. We are the vast early warning system today. Thank you.
Philadelphia is home to the Munter Medical Museum. When I was 10, my class did a field trip to the Munter. I have never forgotten what I saw. The Munter owns a collection of female skeletons. Those women had spent their lives unable to breathe. Corseting had collapsed their rib cages. For weeks, I was haunted by those deformed ribs. It's never just the one sadist, right? It's an entire society that wanted women to suffer, to feel the panic of not enough air and the pain of bone against delicate lung, every second of their adult lives, with no relief and no escape. Right now, a few thousand miles away, girls are being tormented by a practice called breast ironing. If you haven't heard of this, I'm sorry. At the first sign of breast development, large stones, or sometimes a hammer, are heated in scorching rocks and then used to pound on the girl's breasts. It goes on for weeks or months. Their ribs are cracked, their breasts are destroyed, they are covered in burns and blisters. It's torture. Why? This is a quote: to keep dishonor from the family. The adults across Central and Southern Africa agree that destroying a girl's breasts will keep men from raping her. Can I just say, it's not the girls who need to be beaten and burned with hammers. Worse, 16% of the girls did it to themselves in a desperate attempt to delay child marriage. That's a euphemism for her sale to an older man who will own and rape her. This is the fox chewing off its leg to get out of the trap. And this is why notions of consent are wholly inadequate to free women. Some girls are also given binders, which compress the breasts, destroy the tissue, and sometimes crack their ribs. They will spend the rest of their lives in pain. And that is also happening right now in the United States. It doesn't matter what culture or continent. In patriarchy, the female body is shameful and needs to be punished. It's also public property, which makes living in one unbearable. And some girls will respond by doing the damage themselves. The fox chewing off her own breasts. In California, girls as young as 12 are having double mastectomies. 12-year-old girls are having their breasts cut off. And then there's female genital mutilation. Do I need to describe the unspeakable? At the time of the Munter skeletons, the surgeries offered by gynecologists included removal of the ovaries and the uterus, and various forms of genital mutilation, cauterization of the clitoris with heat or acid, slicing off parts of it, total removal. The doctors created a disease called hysteria and invented procedures to, quote, cure it. The mortality rate for these procedures was as high as 33%, and women lined up to have their hysteria cured by having their sex organs cut off. The only thing that's changed is the name. Hysteria is now called dysphoria. And the same organs, generative, generous with life and pleasure, anciently woven into body and brain, providing a 200 million year roar of mammalian mother love, on which our species depends. Those organs are once again being sliced from the bodies of suffering women. The suffering is real, of course, but the source is not the female body, and never has been. Girls hate their bodies because those bodies are on display, objectified, ridiculed, bought and sold, grabbed and violated. Child sexual abuse is especially designed to turn the body into a cage. The bars may start as terror and pain, but they will harden to self-loathing. And girls are lining up once again to mortify their female flesh. Let's be very clear about what these treatments do. Puberty blockers are permanently damaging. Without adult hormones, the bones can't mineralize to adult density. There are women in their early 20s whose joints and spines are literally crumbling. This is permanent, as is the horrendous pain. Adding male levels of testosterone to the female body destroys the liver, triggers blood clots, and creates a cancer risk so high that the uterus and ovaries have to be removed at 5 years. The vagina may also be cut out. The euphemism for this is jack-o'-lanterning, and the wound sewn shut. Teenage girls are thrown into medical menopause and vulvovaginal atrophy. Urinary incontinence is a guaranteed outcome. Guaranteed. The tissue is so thin it tears and bleeds and causes constant pain. Testosterone also triggers clitoromegaly, that's the growth of the clitoris, which then protrudes past the protective folds of the vulva. It's exquisitely painful, it's permanent, and it wrecks sexual function. And finally, testosterone causes the uterus to seize up at orgasm in spasms that can last for 3 days. Instead of pleasure, there is only debilitating pain. Those treatments are grotesque, and at some point in the future, people will look back on this in horror. The way we look at the collapsed ribs and excised ovaries of the 19th century. The way we look at breast ironing in Cameroon and FGM in Somalia. All of this is happening here and now. The cracked ribs, the bruised and deformed breasts, the drugs, and then scalpels, removing all capacity for pleasure. The body once again punished for the sin of being female. Patriarchy can't get enough of that punishment. There's no bottom to this sadism. But when those future people look back in horror, I want them to know that we were standing here, a bulwark between all those girls and all those scalpels. That people called feminists remembered that the female body is precious and blameless and deserves reverence and awe. That there were women who tried to protect girls from the sexual predators and the medical predators. You come for our girls, we're coming for you. You may have bottomless sadism, but you know what we have? 200 million years of mammalian maternal love. And against that, boys, you don't stand a chance.
Good afternoon. My name is Irene Lawrence, and I serve on the board of the U.S. chapter of Women's Declaration International, which is a radical feminist organization that exists to advance the Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights. Article 8 of the Declaration demands single-sex provisions, including hospital wards, domestic violence shelters, public bathrooms, and prisons, to promote the physical safety, privacy, and dignity of women and girls. Of these spaces, prisons are the most opaque. Their policies are hidden from the public and are often hard to access even to those who work within prison systems. And the people housed there are often the most forgotten by society. We take it for granted that men commit the vast majority of crimes and that therefore the vast majority of incarcerated people are men. But women are the fastest growing group of incarcerated people. Between 1980 and 2022, the number of incarcerated women increased by more than 585%. Since 1980, women's imprisonment has grown at twice the rate of men's. The more, quote, progressive among us pride ourselves on seeing the need for incarcerated people to be rehabilitated and not simply punished. But incarcerated women, as a group, are in need of a very different kind of rehabilitation than incarcerated men are. Incarcerated men need to be taught to not act in antisocial ways, to not lash out in anger or violence at people who piss them off. Incarcerated women's crimes more often have to do with being naive, under someone else's influence, and especially traumatized. Their rehabilitation often requires development of better boundaries, self-worth, skills, and freedom from the men who have harmed them. Indeed, women in prison are especially in need of safety from male violence. And no rehabilitation at all can happen if women are even less safe in prison than they were before. Approximately 60 to 70% of incarcerated women or girls have experienced physical or sexual violence in childhood. Approximately 70 to 80% of incarcerated women have reported experiencing intimate partner violence. Women with such histories are then further victimized by the prison system, which is harsh at best. At its worst, its employees assault or rape women and traumatize them further. In April of this year, for example, the Federal Correctional Institute at Dublin, a women's minimum security prison in California, suddenly closed due to sexual abuse of inmates by staff, unnecessary disciplinary measures, and lack of programming. Sometimes the assaults of incarcerated women even come from male inmates. California's Senate Bill 132 allows incarcerated people to request to be housed in the institution that aligns with their gender identity. Since August 5th, 338 incarcerated men in California have requested to be moved to a women's prison, of which 46 have been approved for transfer. Here's what some of the women incarcerated with these men have to say about their presence. This is the most malicious way to tell an abused woman what we went through wasn't important. You are sacrificing our safety just to keep a few men quiet. Another says, ever since SB 132 passed, I have been living in constant fear. I understand that I am in prison, but I am a survivor of abuse, so to have men incarcerated alongside me is fearsome. Another says, imagine the horror of a possible sex offender moving to a woman's cell, showering with us, and working alongside us. For women, including myself, who have witnessed domestic abuse and endured molestation, the effects of PTSD are real and easily triggered by male presence. And finally, I have to sleep in shifts to keep vigil, to keep myself and others safe. It has taken me the last 15 years to rebuild myself and make a safe environment to be able to heal. Does anyone know what we should do when we have to shower? Did anyone consider how much physical damage a male inmate could do to me? It was only thanks to many decades of women's activism that incarcerated women were even considered worthy of rehabilitation. Now this latest form of male violence is threatening to undermine all the progress these activists made in making spaces that centered women's needs and experiences. It's the very men who most want to be in our spaces who most need to be kept out. Even though all male prisoners may not be dangerous, by the time we can see who the dangerous ones are, it's too late. One of the most insidious parts of the narrative around the need for rehabilitation is that it lumps all incarcerated people together, pressuring women to side with men to say that everyone deserves a second chance. And maybe everyone does deserve a second chance. But that empathy and trust, especially towards men who have assaulted us, should not be extended at women's expense. Most of us have had crimes committed against us that we could have had a man prosecuted for. And whether we've forgiven him or not, whether he's served time for it or not, we don't owe him our forgiveness, intimacy, or sympathy, even if his violence has stopped. Women cannot keep looking to men to heal from male violence. I don't want more men incarcerated. I want a culture where women are actually safer because both men and women refuse to tolerate male violence against women. In the meantime, women need our own spaces to heal, to process, to build our own skills and self-esteem, and to help each other realize that we don't need to be dependent on a man. What happens to incarcerated women affects all women. If their humanity, safety, and boundaries aren't recognized, then no woman is safe. Feminism that doesn't actively speak up for these women is worthless.
If the Lesbian, Gay, and Bisexual Alliance USA could summarize our message here today in one sentence, it would be this: we will fight for the dignity and boundaries of lesbians and bisexual women everywhere. At its core, gender ideology perpetuates the lesbophobic idea that a woman's sexual orientation to other women makes her closer to being a man than to being a woman. It makes heterosexuality the standard. Gender ideology targets lesbians by singling out our sex role nonconformity, both in our appearance and our sexual orientation, as evidence that we are indeed not women at all. This is false, lesbophobic, and deeply misogynist. LGBT Alliance USA is a group dedicated to fighting for the rights of lesbians, gays, and bisexuals free from the shackles of gender ideology. We host a series of online Zoom gatherings for LGBT people, including social clubs for lesbians and bisexual women. Many of the stories we hear in these groups are harrowing, especially from young women. We've had young lesbians tell us about the pressure they have faced to date trans-identifying males. We have also heard of the pressure young lesbian and bisexual women face to transition, both from, quote, LGBTQ plus organizations like the Trevor Project, and even from high school GSA clubs. These were formerly called Gay Straight Alliance, but now they're Gender and Sexuality Awareness. Even lesbians who do not medicalize will adopt trendy new labels popularized on social media platforms like Tumblr. Meanwhile, the very word lesbian, along with the words woman, mother, aunt, sister, are lost or redefined to mean heterosexual men who think they are women. And this comes following years, even decades, of, quote, trans rights activists, unquote, trying to infiltrate lesbian spaces and harass those of us who say no. Single-sex spaces are an indispensable part of lesbian community. When single-sex spaces are erased, the lesbian community is erased. And this only feeds into the vicious cycle of isolation and violence that so many lesbians face. LGBT Alliance USA is trying to rebuild lesbian community, and we demand our right to single-sex spaces be codified into law. It's maddening that legacy gay rights organizations such as Lambda Legal, the ACLU, and the Human Rights Campaign now call themselves, quote, LGBTQ plus, end quote, organizations. And they are marketing these brazen violations of lesbian boundaries as both tolerant and inclusive. They have taken the banner for lesbian and gay rights and force-teamed it with male fetishists, as well as queer theory philosophers untethered from the realities of the damage that their academic theories are causing to young women. We must protect lesbians and bisexual women, protect female-only spaces, and protect the integrity of women's sexualities. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mary Kate Fain. and I'm the founder of Liberation Philadelphia, a group that no longer exists because the progressives of this city decided that women did not matter, did not exist, and should not be allowed to speak about our experiences as women, females. But Philadelphia has a long history in the fight for liberation. In 1915, the Pennsylvania suffragettes commissioned a casting of the Justice Bell, a replica of the very Liberty Bell we see before us here today. But this bell had one major difference. The clapper was chained to the side, preventing the bell from ringing, symbolizing the silencing of women's voices. For 5 years, that bell traveled the country, raising awareness of the fight for women's suffrage. It did not ring until 1920, when it returned home to this very square to celebrate the passage of the 19th Amendment. But that was just the beginning of our fight. Over 100 years later, women's voices remain silenced in new ways that our foremothers could never imagine, thanks to technology. Digital stalking, AI porn, death and rape threats sent over Twitter DMs. These are just a modern repackaging of the same patriarchy that women have fought for centuries. In 2019, I was fired from my job at a Philadelphia software agency located just a few blocks away from here. They fired me for writing about modern threats to feminism, including gender identity. I am far from the only woman who has experienced this. It was only in 1964 that discrimination on the basis of sex became illegal in the workplace. But today, in 2024, a woman's right to work, to pay her bills, to be able to support herself without the financial dependence on a man, depends on her willingness to be silent about her own oppression. If it's not our jobs at risk for speaking out, it's our safety. Participating online, even on discussions not about feminism, exposes women to a constant barrage of harassment. Women receive rape threats, death threats. Many women on this stage can tell you today. Even when these threats do not escalate to real-world violence, which they have and do, the cost is too often that women become afraid. They go silent, anonymous, forced to hide behind fake names and avatars in order to speak the truth about male violence. This silencing of women is not a symptom or a side effect. It is the goal, and it is working. The internet has opened up new and creative ways for men who abuse women to further their terrorism. Digital stalking, where men create hundreds of sock accounts to non-stop harass women with a constant stream of messages on every platform. You block one, 3 pop up in their place. Doxing, like what happened to Feminist Current founder Megan Murphy in 2021, when her website was hacked and in its place they put her address for everyone to see. Revenge porn, where men and boys share intimate photos of women and girls with the goal of humiliating and isolating them. AI porn, a new threat that's already showing up in our schools, where girls are being digitally undressed and humiliated with sexually degrading content for the whole school to see. And let's not forget the entire industry of regular porn and human trafficking that built the internet in the first place, on the literal backs of women and girls, and still makes up over 30% of content that is transmitted over the web every single day. For any woman wishing to avoid the worst of this, you may think women-only spaces on the web can provide a safe haven, but these platforms are often some of the biggest targets of male hatred and are forced to weather every kind of attack in an attempt to shut them down. When I launched Spinster, a feminist social media platform, men spammed the site with gore porn, the most violent, disgusting category of content imaginable. Stuff that most women do not even know exists and that I do not wish anyone to ever have to see. This was done to make the site unusable, so that women would once again be silenced. We stopped them, but that was just day one. For 5 years, we have fought to keep space available for women online. It should not be this hard. This digital misogyny is not without real-world harm. Teenage boys and men are radicalized on the internet from the age of 12, if not sooner. They terrorize women on and offline. Elliot Rodger, who killed 6 people in his hate-fueled rampage against a sorority, has become a hero for an entire community of incels online. men who view themselves as entitled to sex from women. The patriarchy may have shifted in the past century, but the core tenets remain the same: violence against women and silencing of our voices. The internet has become a new frontier for misogyny, in a space where boys are radicalized extremely young and where women who fight back are silenced, either explicitly through censorship and violence or through fear of threats and cancellation. The justice bell may have rung out here 104 years ago to symbolize the liberation of women's voices when we gained the right to vote. But the threats we face today are more insidious than ever. We will need to fight just as hard as our foremothers, be just as fearless as the suffragettes, and as loud as possible to ensure we are not silenced. End the silence, stop male violence.
Because we are not powerless, we are not voiceless, we can do some things. So first things first, right? Speak out like we are doing here today, right? We have to speak out on violence against women and girls. We have to challenge societal attitudes and myths that allow it to contribute. We want to challenge the condoning of violence, and we want to call out sexual harassment when we see it. For many of us, that's just a daily experience, right? And so we just try to brush it off and move on away from it. That actually just allows it to continue. We just need to push back on it being normalized and continuing it. We want to make a safer environment for ourselves, online and offline, and for peers. And we want to challenge others. So when we see, harassment or catcalls or things being given to other women, step in, and say, no, that's not okay. Cut that out. We need to be very considerate of our diverse realities as women. I've gotten to talk to some women here today who have faced similar challenges, but entirely different communities. And there is a cultural sensitivity that we need to have in regards to that, and understand how that experience, that living in different cultural contexts, influences your experience of violence against women. I want to say this, and not everybody's going to agree, but support women's leadership. We need to have women's representation in decision-making spaces. We just have to ensure that the needs of women and girls are front and center. We need that in crisis response. We need humanitarian. We need in policies of all kinds. We want to call for increased women's representation and leadership, and for heightened protections for women in power. You may or may not know it. Elected women get online abuse at about 26%, 26 times the rate of their male peers. So a female elected official gets way more online abuse than a male peer. A female elected official of color make that about 186 times more abuse online than your nearest peer. So we are running women out of office that could actually be helping us, right? So we don't want to do that. I'm also going to encourage you, take matters into your own hands. Run for office yourself. Be the change. Be the woman that you want to see in leadership in this world. We need to do a lot more of that. We need to encourage women to run. I don't know if you know this, but only 2% of all the nonprofit and government funding that's available out there goes to women's nonprofits. Did you know that? That we're that low of a priority. So one of the first things we could do is issue a strong call for adequate support services and fund women's organizations. As MK just told you, many women's organizations are being defunded, siloed, deplatformed, silenced in decision-making spaces. We have to find a way to make it our government's priorities, whether that's at the city, the state, the national level, or even at the UN. We have to find a way to make, them feel the pressure that funding women's rights organizations is key to finding solutions. We need to demand more data, right? So a lot of times we don't even know what the statistics are on violence against women and girls because it's not captured adequately, right? So relevant data collection is really important for this. Call on your government to invest in the collection of data on sex-based violence. And you use that to then push for stronger laws globally. We are 21 years away globally from comprehensive laws banning violence against women to be in place. 21 years away. What did CEDAW start in the 60s, right? We have tried so hard to get laws on the books to ban violence against women, and we are still this far away. We need stronger protection mechanisms to prevent and eliminate violence, harassment, threats, intimidation, and discrimination against women's rights defenders, women's rights advocates, and activists. Those of us that are on the front lines, we do get those threats. We do get all the online violence. Yeah, we have to push back against that. We have to strengthen protections for the women that are fighting for women's rights. Challenge the sex stereotypes, right? So we know that the sex stereotypes actually hurt us. Push back on rhetoric that say women don't know who to vote for and therefore should have their vote taken away. Push back. This rhetoric out there, it's very strong right now. Always remember, violence against women and girls is never justified. It's just never can I get an amen? It's violence against, it's never justified, right? There's never justified. And we need to educate men and boys. We do. We need to educate them on positive masculinity, respectful relationships, and the culture of what is consent. Understand what consent means, because we need to end rape culture. We just need to end it. And then finally, I want to encourage you, meet with your elected representatives, whether it's the mayor and you talk to them about getting yourself more streetlights to make your community safer, whether it's your police chief, whether it is your state representative, so you can ask them, can you put some stronger laws on the books, and can the state more fully fund women's rights organizations and women's nonprofits, put more women in office. You have a lot you can do here that, you can take some power and you can turn some things around. Do not let yourself be silenced. End the silence. No more violence. Women will be free. Thank you. We got a special piece of recognition coming. Christine here was able to get a proclamation from Allegheny County in honor of what we are doing here today. So she's going to read it to you.
I submitted this to Sarah Innamorato, who is the Allegheny County Chief Executive, which means she's the highest elected official in Allegheny County, which, if you don't know where that is, that's in southwestern Pennsylvania, where Pittsburgh is located. At this time, we have not seen it posted on the website yet, but this is what we submitted. Proclamation for September 14th, 2004 as Pennsylvania Women's Upraising Day. On September 14th, 2024, the Women's Liberation Front, or WOLF, held a Pennsylvania Women's Upraising to protest violence against women and girls in all its forms. Allegheny County stands with WOLF in solidarity. We honor the 104th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which finally granted U.S. women the right to vote. We demand to #end male violence. Allegheny County concurs with WOLF that violence against women and girls takes many forms: physical, sexual, verbal, economic, dehumanization, erasure, and intimidation. It violates women's and girls' fundamental human rights. Allegheny County and WOLF seek to abolish all male violence against women and girls. We encourage organized resistance to rape culture. We seek legal justice for survivors of male violence. We demand our right to define ourselves, and we fight against the normalization of violent or degrading sexual practices, the eroticization of women's suffering, loss of our bodily autonomy, and destructive relationships that limit the sovereignty of women and girls. Unfortunately, male violence is called so many different things that we might not see how pervasive and permissible it has become in our culture. One dangerous myth in particular is that male violence only happens to a very small number of women. On the contrary, male violence is ubiquitous, and every woman has a regrettably familiar story. Every woman has one. Even worse, some elected officials and the public may regard violence as inevitable for some women because of their socioeconomic status, their profession, their sexual orientation, or even their place of residence. Be it conflict zones, so-called bad neighborhoods, or public housing. Male violence knows no restrictions. Any woman or girl can be victimized, anywhere, anytime. As Allegheny County Executive, I, Sarah Innamorato, proclaim that we must respond to this crisis of male violence against women and girls. Violence against women and girls is never acceptable. When we condone violence against any woman, we are opening the door for violence against every woman. It is time for everyone to see the danger and act. Women are our mothers, our daughters, our sisters, our spouses, our partners, our aunts, neighbors, co-workers, teachers, physicians, therapists, clergy, attorneys, babysitters, and of course, ourselves. Together, we can end all violence against women and girls in all its hideous forms. Thanks, everybody.
So thank you for coming out and joining us today to talk about a very uncomfortable subject, violence against women and girls. Thank you for being part of the Women's Upraising and raising up our voices today. What I'd like to do is we'd like to do a group picture, so I'd like to have all of you come to the stage if you can, and we'll just take one giant group shot. So please come. Yep, please come on up. Come on up, come on up. Everybody come up.
Women's Liberation Front!
And Philly PD, thank you to you. Thanks for coming out today and making sure the ladies stay safe out here. Much appreciated. And the National Park Service, thank you for letting us do this here today. Much appreciated.